Strategies with Fluency Part 2. We have Tim McAfee with us again today. He is a board-certified specialist with Fluency. He has a private practice in the Atlanta area and works with preschool through adults. Tim has presented in a number of different places with on a number of different topics, specializing in fluency. And I know that folks in our realm working in the schools have really enjoyed his presentations. And we're glad to have him back to give us a little bit more information in depth about strategies for working with students with fluency disorder. So glad to have you, Tim.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. And a couple of slides we're going to dip back to the beginning of part 1, and then we'll go forward. A lot of things we want to cover are how to help the child who stutters at school, from speaking strategies to being able to read out loud more fluently, to supporting them, and also when anxiety begins to make its roots. It's very unfortunate when it happens, which is why we try to get children when they're young. Once children hit about age 6, we start having the anxiety oftentimes from being teased and bullied, and we have to wear the hat of a quote-unquote psychologist and speech pathologist at the same time. And it's a very, very important skill set to have, because all the techniques in the world go out the window when a child has the fear. I want to share a story with you. I met a young man yesterday. He's 25 years old. He was served for stuttering as a child in multiple places, both clinics and the school system. So he presented to me yesterday, and I'm going to read for you his inventory of things he does trying not to stutter. And this will again lead you all to wanting to help children who stutter as much as you can while you have them at your age. So here's his list of things he does trying not to stutter. At work, he works in an open office environment, so there are other people who can hear him talk. When he gets a phone call, he will leave his desk and go down a hallway so that others won't hear him talk. He avoids talking when he thinks he's going to stutter. That's number 2. He doesn't leave a voicemail, or he re-records a voicemail when he stutters. He refrains from introducing his wife and others if he thinks he's going to stutter. When he goes out to eat, if he feels like he's going to stutter, he points to the item on the menu for the waiter to say it, and then he'll say, "Oh yeah, I'll have that." He avoids sharing in meetings when his sharing is very important, but he will actually defer making an important point in a meeting if he thinks he's going to stutter. He will defer to his wife to make phone calls to people like a plumber, because he fears a stutter on his name and his address and his part of town. We wish this wasn't common, but it really is. When you get to know an older child, like in high school, the stuttering oftentimes can take this kind of depth. And there's a big difference between trying not to stutter and trying to be quote-unquote fluent. The word fluent is slippery. You know, our goal is not for someone to be perfect. But just, if I have to throw out a word as an opposite to blocking, we'll just use the word fluency. So, am I trying not to stutter, or am I trying to be more fluent? And once children have a lot of scars from being embarrassed and teased and bullied, a lot of times they go into a mode where they're trying to prevent the stuttering. So that's going to be a thrust for us during this talk today. So We'll visit a slide from the last time. Again, we want to put the child first. We advocate for the child. And sometimes I have to tell parents some pointed things about what I'm seeing and hearing about how they react to stuttering because I'm advocating for the child. An example was this afternoon. The parents have brought their child in for only 2 sessions of therapy. And they come back this afternoon, Tuesday, for session number 3. And in the lobby, the woman says, well, we're not doing any practice, but when my child has a stutter, we stop him and we remind him what he's supposed to be doing. So that is a reactive parent, a parent who reacts to the moment of stuttering. A proactive parent uses the techniques that they're being taught and refrains from correcting the child in conversation. Surely, after only 1 week of speech therapy, they have no business stopping a child in car rides and dinners and whatnot. It's not cool. So as an advocate for the child, I'm going to very artfully explain too much too soon, right? So it all revolves around the child, and we have parents, speech paths, and I always encourage parents to meet with a whole team of teachers, art, PE, music specials, not just homeroom. Do not thrust the burden on homeroom and expect homeroom to go around and tell everybody. If you only give a handout, some handouts go in the garbage can. We need FaceTime. Parents need FaceTime. A lot of times speech paths carry the burden of stuttering on their shoulders. The parents aren't involved, the child's suffering, I'm going to try to fix it, I'm going to work with the teacher. If you have 1 or 2 parents that are somewhat stable, make sure you employ the parent, because let's pretend you're helping a kid in 4th grade, he's going to 5th, then he's going to leave your school. Ultimately, the parent remains their advocate through middle school, high school, and beyond. So you want to empower parents the best you can. Again, get good samples. Differential diagnosis, we went through this the first time, very important to go through it real quick, that you want to record a sample, transcribe a sample, and differentially diagnose between sound reps, syllable reps, prolongations, blocks, word reps. Know that a filler, I had a girl in this morning who would say, but, what's that game? And then but, that looks fun. So she's using the word but as a filler before specific sounds where she thinks she's going to stutter. So watch fillers, watch and see what comes right after fillers. We talked about classic words for young children to stutter, pronouns, question words like what, why, where, when, and can. I go after those specific words and fix them. Differential diagnosis, it's a percentage of stuttered syllables, not percentage of stuttered words. Now we're down to teacher, slide number 7. To get stability within the child, we have to look at how's the child going to perform in oral reports, reading out loud? Is he being teased and bullied? The parents' role in the classroom, working as a team, plays and performances. I'm going to give you an example. I met a boy a few weeks ago on a weekend. I agreed to come in on the weekend because his parents called me and said he was a mess. 6 days later, he was supposed to read in front of his church, and he had a lot of anxiety, and he wanted to get out of it. And he had to rally quickly. I was able to see him for an eval and then 2 appointments before he had to speak. And first of all, I had to do some CBT to find out the source of his anxiety. He had been bullied recently, teased and mimicked, and he was afraid that if he stuttered at church in front of about 300 people, that his peers would bully him again. So we had to reframe those incidents that had happened, and then we took his prayer and we marked it into phrasing. And I had his mother, so when you look at slide 7, most everything in slide 7 was handled with this child and handled quickly. I had the mother take the prayer and retype it in a larger font. We marked it into phrases. We took a highlighter pen and put it in the proper sections. I had him practice it over and over again. The parent took a role, as you see in slide 7. We're working as a team with the teacher. The teacher was like, should I have him do it or should I excuse him? This involved oral speaking. This involved kind of a play and a performance. So everything in slide 7 was all happening with this child. I'm pleased to say that in this instance, the child absolutely nailed it. He stayed completely smooth as he read out loud. And then once we got that over, then we needed to work on day in, day out speech. Enabling stuttering, this goes on. You have to find out from parents if they're doing things like ordering food for the children, making calls, speaking in public, so after church, there's small talk. Hey, Tommy, what school are you at? And then the parents start speaking for Tommy because Tommy's going to stutter. We need to find these things out. And remember, any strategy that's designed to conceal stuttering will backfire. So a 4th grader has the lines of his play changed to remove the feared word. So here, a figure of authority, an adult, has told this child, because you're unable to say this word, we're going to change the line. And then probably the peers find out too. Why did we change the line? Well, Tommy can't say it. So then the play happens, and afterwards he can feel shame, he can feel embarrassment for years to come, folks. We'd rather reduce his anxiety and help him learn to say that word than change the word, because the long-term effect is much more serious than the Band-Aid of changing the word. So in-block correction. We want to go through this quick. Remember, the children, you want them to become experts at the articulators, tongue, lips, and voice. Which sounds are lip sounds, which are tongue, which are vocal cord. Children that come to see me as young as age 6 would freak you out as I'll go, and they'll say, that's voice, or because that's lips, that's tongue. And we do pseudo stutters and teach them the articulators. They become experts at these. And then the in-block correction, the proper way to do a pull-out is to loosen the articulator and let the word out on an exhalation. Positively refrain from telling children to take a deep breath before the stutter or during the correction. If you begin to stutter and you inhale, there's a very good chance you will ignite a second stutter because now you have fresh air behind that stutter. So a lot of people teach pullouts incorrectly. Light contacts. Be careful over teaching stretching. Sometimes I'll meet children who have been told by somebody to elongate, and sometimes it's too dramatic. The children run out of breath, their pitch rises, and we've created a pretty glaring stutter symptom that began with good intentions. But remember, the road to blank is paved with good intentions, right? Breathing, this is big. It's 2015. All these kids are coming to me. Someone told them to take a deep breath. So we might have done this last call. We'll do it real quick. I want everyone to put their hand on their sternum. And when I say go, count to 8 out loud without taking a breath. Just begin counting out loud. Ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 8 words without taking a breath. I can count to 40 if I'm showing off. So remember, during a panic attack, blood leaves for your extremities and your diaphragm muscle tightens. Once your diaphragm muscle tightens, you tend to take a shallow, quick breath up in the clavicles, right? So I'm in a panic. It's the first day of camp, and we have to go around the cabin and say our name. And I always stutter on Tim. And someone said, okay, when you're about to stutter, take that deep breath. So they come to me, I'm in a panic, and I go, please, please, please avoid that. We initiate speech on exhalation. And then eventually, obviously, we need a breath, and that's where phrasing comes in. Breaking words into groups of 2 to 6 words. There are programs, there are intensive programs here in America that still teach the full breath target. And oh man, it's crazy. So, do we need the inhale before speech? No. Where we breathe from? Hopefully the diaphragm. When do we breathe? At the end of the utterance when we need a breath. What if you breathe just before stutter? Just covered it. You're kindling the fire. What if you try a pull-out inhale and start a word? You may ignite a second stutter. What's the full breath target? It takes the form of, now son, take a deep breath just before you talk, and then anytime you stutter, make sure you stop, take a deep breath, and try the word again. What happens to breathing during panic? Covered it. Please avoid the full breath target. Okay, oral reading. You know, it's typical, folks, for your younger children, say age 6 or 7, the early, just beginning to read, to stutter very little in oral reading. Can you guess why? No one's typing to me, so I'll fill in the blank. Early phonetic decoding. As I look down, the turtle slid into the lake off of the log. So the words are provided. I'm going super slow, trying to sound out my words, and I have virtually no stuttering. But little Tim in narrative is 32% disfluent. But when he reads, he doesn't stutter. That's what it is. We can take advantage of reading by teaching phrasing. Your older children may have already developed a problem when reading out loud if they have developed a timeline. So I read out loud, I stutter, and I get embarrassed, or someone says something. All of a sudden, I have anxiety about reading. So now my stuttering has leaked into my reading out loud. And the Dibble test, children who stutter are exempt from the Dibble. It comes up a lot of times. The Dibble is used, I think, a lot in the Southeast because it came up when I was speaking in Florida, South Carolina, and Georgia. Remember, the Dibble is, son, read this paragraph as fast as you can. And then if there's any errors of any sort, they're counted. So what if I have repetitions? The proctor of the test, oftentimes a teacher who doesn't understand stuttering, is ticking those off as errors. I've met children who have been held back academic grades because of the Dibble. When they're a child who stutters, they are exempt. I have a statement from Dibble that says a child who stutters is exempt. Teachers should not excuse children from presentations and plays and whatnot. That's where we come in. That's our job, to help support them with the parent and the teacher, do our very best to give them the best foot forward. We can't make a guarantee, like this child will stand up and not stutter. We can't make that guarantee. But I will tell you my own personal history. I used to try to get out of reading out loud, tried to get out of plays and so forth and so on. I had to clean up that whole mess in my 20s. So utilize oral reading to teach phrasing. You know, the old talking about if the child would just slow down and plan his words, he would do better. Phrasing is the modality that is time tested. It appeared in the King's Speech, and Joe Biden says that he learned it from the nuns when he was a child. 100 years from now, 500 years from now, as human beings speak, phrasing is what makes Morgan Freeman sound like $1 million. You get the resonance of the voice with phrasing. So again, it's how we slow down. We know phrasing and rate control is critical. The slower I go, the less I will stutter. Pretty much a golden rule. It also increases the chances of in-block correction, because tongue, lips, and voice are fine motor coordination, like texting and threading a needle. The tiny muscles require rate control. Then we'll talk about how to transition phrasing into dialogue and narrative so that we know how to do it beyond oral reading. Well, that's fancy. Aha. So there's an example there. The turtle slid off the log into the lake. Phrases should be 2 to 6 words. Now, if it's a list like tigers, lions, cheetahs, jaguars, every comma, you're going to take a pause. So phrasing, first you begin with a number of phrases. How many phrases can the child say? Oftentimes I will have a ruler on the table, a 12-inch ruler, and with a Sharpie every 2 inches, I make a bold line, and the child will slide his hands. Now your special needs child, your ADHD child, your child on the spectrum, anyone who's very impulsive, may need that ruler. I even one time, we had a child who was really strung up, and his mother super glued some Legos to the ruler. So every 2 inches there was a Lego, which worked like a hurdle for a track star. Like his finger would bump into the Lego, and that basically commanded him to take his pause. So the more think, and as we always do, we start with maximum assistance and reduce to min assistance down to independence. But be creative. So you expand your phrases, 3 phrases, 4 phrases, 5 phrases, all the way to taking a timer and seeing if a child can maintain phrases for, say, 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So some strategies on slide 13. Use a highlighter as needed. Continuous voicing is within each phrase. So if we go up to one there, I like to go to Disney World. My favorite ride is Splash Mountain. I got really wet when I went down the cliff. So inside the phrase, your voice stays on. And if you use phrasing well, you have full intonation up and down, so it doesn't sound rote, it doesn't sound flat. Kids want to sound normal. So make sure that they learn that their pitch can rise and fall and be colorful. I also remind children that the storyteller that comes to class, the storyteller always talks slow and uses her voice and her gestures to make it interesting. The storyteller does not talk quickly. With really severe blocking, 0.5, you may have to use choral reading. And then, so what I'll do is I will tell a child, okay, we're going to start on 3. When I get to 3, we'll start together. 1, 2, 3. I like to go to Disney World. So the child should be going my speed. I will tell them ahead of time, At some point, I'm going to stop reading, but I want you to continue reading the same way. Sometimes if I just hum in the background, they think I'm still, like I'll go, they'll think I'm still reading. It's fascinating. I saw four adults who stutter all read the same passage at the same time. When all four read, all four were fluent. Drop one off, three remain fluent. Drop one out, two remain fluent. And then when they're down to two adults who stutter, one of them stopped reading. The last one, his stuttering reactivated almost immediately. I think the phenomenon there is the spotlight's back on me. Someone was reading exactly the same time. There's no spotlight on me. There's a lot of psychology there. Parents will also say, you know, my child had a stutter. I stopped him. I asked him to say it again. Every time I ask him to say it again, it comes out without a stutter. Number 6, the Tubaloo is your friend. $5 or $6, right? You can accomplish a lot. If you really want to try DAF, there's apps now for DAF for under $100. You can put one on your smartphone and use it. I personally do not use it. A lot of times CBT has to be used to reduce anxiety for your oral reading to be successful. So this is how to integrate it and generalize it. You start real easy with a game like Uno. I have a red 6, and there are children who cannot do that without blocking. Or Go Fish, do you have a 4? Some kids are so severe they can't do that. Describe the pictures using phrases, then go to the timer. Teach it in public speaking. I'll have them stand up and use it. Want to encourage the self-corrections during phrasing. And remember that phrasing is a means to an end. What I mean by that is parents will watch their child in my therapy. They'll watch their child phrase and go, wow, honey, look at how smooth he's being. Oh my God, tears rolling down their cheek, right? And I will remind them, phrasing is a means to an end. If you expect your child to come out in the kitchen in the morning and activate his phrasing as he tells you what he wants for breakfast and maintain his phrasing until he goes to bed at night, it's not going to happen. Phrasing will help reduce rate, give us strategies for doing plays and presentations. It will help us to have a higher percentage of corrections. We just have to remember that children are excitable. They go in carpool. They interrupt each other. They interrupt each other in the cafeteria. They get spazzy when the teacher's at the board. They're not necessarily going to go, oh, wait a minute, I should turn on my phrasing. So I have to tell parents that. Because a lot of times they'll badger, hey, use that phrasing you're learning, use that phrasing you're learning. That comes back to advocate for the child. Okay. Anxiety for children who stutter, I call it the 2 Ps. Projecting is when you imagine you know what people think. Personalization is when you beat yourself up. So if I can swear to you, I do not care what you think when I stutter, but I still don't want to stutter, then I'm personalizing my stutter, such as if I stutter, I'm failing, I'm messing up. Projecting, again, is imagining what people will think. It's massive, massive form of anxiety. How does it happen? From your timeline. Some kids pick on me, they copy me, they keep asking why I do that. Why do you do that? I. Then I begin to project. I begin to imagine what people are thinking. Without CBT, good luck changing that. The other course is a child's speech techniques become so pristine that he hardly ever stutters, and then teasing goes away, and his confidence grows. That can be years, folks. That's why you have to integrate CBT with speech pathology. The prosthetic devices, these have lost their luster once again. You know, the Fluency Master came out in the 80s, and then the Speech Easy came out around, what would you say, about 2000 or 2001, and the main reasons why they tend to fail: noise in their environment, anxiety, and of course state anxiety is a very powerful thing. So if I put an in-the-ear device in a child and say, okay, now go up there and do a report, well, if the child has anxiety, he can't attend to the auditory signal. So that's why they often fail. It's interesting, the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Department will use your tax money and issue one of these to someone, but they won't pay for speech therapy. It's sad. It's sad, but it's true. They will not pay someone to provide speech therapy, but they will buy a device for someone. I don't know how that happened, but it's true. So CBT, I go back on people's timelines. It's exciting therapy. And let's pretend I have a 5th grader. I'm just meeting him. Okay, so CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, aka cognitive reorganization, where a person who stutters develops cognition, such as, if I stutter, the kids will think I'm weird. If I stutter, they'll think I can't read. So you develop cognitions, and those cognitions have to be reframed. Otherwise, you have anxiety about stuttering. I'm sure you've all played at least one sport during your life, and I'm going to use golf. You walk up to a putt that's only 2 feet long. If you say to yourself, don't miss it. If you miss it, you'll be called a choker. Then you're beginning to project your thoughts on the audience, and then you miss it. So CBT is real important. Timeline therapy, I will take a child back on his timeline to events that were painful, and we look at them from the outside, and we find out what they were thinking or feeling about their stuttering. And then I use what's called conversational reframing skills to help them to reorganize their cognitions, reorganize or reframe their thoughts attached to the stuttering. There's a book I want to plug. It's called Mind Lines. Mind as in your mind in your head, lines like a line. Mind Lines. It is single-handedly the best book on the planet for learning how to reframe people. It is dense reading. It's like a textbook. And I'm going to give you a tip. When you get it, what you want to do is start writing statements that you hear from people on 3x5 cards. And then you go home and you look in the book and you learn different ways to reframe the same statement. So CBT helps to reduce anxiety, which then in turn can help use the techniques like the pullouts and the phrasing, allows the children to use them when they need them, like show and tell. Or the child who has to go down to the office and speak into the microphone and everyone's going to see him on TV. This is also why we want to be very involved and parents to be involved, so we know about these things before they happen. Sometimes if we have a worst case scenario, we have a child with a stutter in the classroom, the teacher doesn't understand the depth of his stutter, and he is taken down to the office, he reads or he speaks into the microphone, he has a bunch of stuttering events. When he walks back into the classroom, people bring it to his attention. Oh, Chase, man, you were stuttering. So, these things happen. It's very unfortunate, but they can happen. So anxiety reduction is huge. It's often vital to success with strategies. And the grand slam here is to get kids to be stable. So I want to look over at your outcomes for part 2 here, and one of them is 3 ways to help to elicit symptoms of cognitive distortions and anxiety. Okay? Here's one. And you have to get a person to reflect back to the moment of stuttering to be able to extract the thoughts. A great question is, what would it, or see, these can be spoken in the past tense or the future tense. So we're going to, for the purposes of this, we're going to imagine that a child's going to do a book report, and he's telling you he has anxiety. And I will have children rate that anxiety in their body. So they'll say, for example, they feel an 8 out of 10 in their chest. That's pretty strong. They're very fearful. So one question might be, so what do you believe will happen if you stutter? What do you believe will happen? That's a great question, because it will then reveal a belief. Well, if I stutter, the kids will think I'm dumb. So that's how I found my belief. Question? What would it mean to you to stutter? What kind of meaning are you assigning to stuttering? Like failure? Sometimes with children you have to simplify the language. So a twist would be, so Chase, what do you think will happen if you stutter? So if you say, what do you believe? If it's a child, they might go, what do you mean, what will I believe? So simplify your language. What do you think will happen if you stutter? Well, somebody might laugh. And what if they did laugh is your next question. You might also ask, are there times when they have laughed? But you wouldn't stop at they might laugh. You want to find out, well, Chase, what would happen if they did laugh? At that point, he might say, well, I would feel dumb. Like, I will feel dumb if I stutter. Now we've moved meta up into Chase's thoughts and feelings about stuttering. Learning outcome 2, some tips and strategies to share with the teachers and the caregivers. One of them is anything we're going to read out loud, I suggest be marked into phrasing, as long as the child is now reading. Phrasing gives us some sense of insurance and safety. Again, it isn't a guarantee. There's a quote I love that I learned from my doctor: dig a well before you're thirsty. Dig a well before you're thirsty. So my student who had to read in front of the church reduced his anxiety, marked his prayer into phrasing, and rehearsed it over and over again. We dug a well before he was thirsty. So tip 1, mark stuff into phrases. Tip 2, include the children, do not enable and excuse. Another tip, try to involve the parents in the process of therapy. Another, empower teachers to, if you know bullying's happening, teach them how to look out for it, where it's happening. Sometimes the teacher needs to have that talk to the class. I refrain from bringing a child up and putting a spotlight on him and going, Tommy here stutters, okay? And everyone needs to leave Tommy alone. Rather, the teacher gives a general speech about how we're different, how we're the same, and then brings up speech differences. Sometimes we need to do that. All right. Group therapy, some of you do it because of your caseload. Group therapy can have some limitations, and one of them is, let's pretend a child has been teased and bullied and wants to talk about it confidentially. They don't want 1, 2, 3 of their peers hearing them talk about being mocked by a classmate. Group therapy can have an advantage too, such as practicing an oral report in front of a small group. So confidential stuff, sometimes you need to make time just for that child. Ooh. Even though we're at our final slide, there's more to say. Let me walk you through the teaching of pullouts and in-block correction. I find a lot of people have trouble teaching this to children. A lot of children come in, and even though they've had speech therapy, they do not have a clue on how to stop a stutter. They just, on an impulse, drive through the stuttering. So let's go back to step one. Step one is learning the tongue, lips, and voice, the 3 articulators, and pseudo-stuttering can be priceless. I will set up an activity for the child to identify when I stutter and maybe throw a dart at a dartboard, which they find really fun, when they catch me stuttering and can tell me where I stuttered. At this point, we're also removing stigma, that we can do fake stuttering, and we're teaching our muscle groups how to release a stutter. Then, depending upon severity, we may have to rotate a verb card very slowly and give the child a carrier phrase, such as start with I see. So I rotate the card to one side of my head, and the child is to begin with, I see a turtle, or I see a mouse. And yes, there are children that can't do that without blocking. Once we just have something like a carrier phrase and a noun, then maybe they can describe a picture. The boy is eating ice cream. And I am coaching them to identify their stuttering. Sometimes I'll have a point. They'll receive 2 points if they catch the stutter by themselves and 1 point if I help. And then anytime they catch me stuttering, they also get a point. So it's very engaged, it's very active. And I'm coaching them and teaching them how to identify the moment of the stutter and use a pullout. We tend to track which words and sounds are most chronic. I might then do a border game where I have a field of, say, 5 things on the table. They could be different types of cars for a boy, like a police car, a fire truck, a tow truck, a Jeep, and a sports car. So the child identifies them, and then the barrier goes up and he has to ask questions to see which one I'm holding. And you guys know that the bigger the field, the harder it is. If you go from 5 items to 7 to 10. A lot of times this activity will make the child confront words like what color is it? Does it have a siren? So a lot of these difficult words are put into play during the game, and I'm coaching them if they do stutter and they can't correct it on their own. So I'm real big on teaching children how to identify the stutter and correct it as it happens, because the greatest way to reduce teasing and attention to my stuttering is to reduce my symptoms. The more mild my stutters are, the less attention they attract. It's very empowering for a person who stutters to learn how to stop the stutters. Then where would we go with stuttering corrections? You might do a game like Taboo Junior, which there's a word on top of the card and 3 words that you cannot use. So, for example, if the word was baseball, maybe glove, bat, and base cannot be used. And the child has a stack of cards. I have a stack of cards. He's learning how to fix his stutters. And we begin the game of Taboo Junior. Because of the demands on language, the word finding and such, this is going to cross the threshold into stuttering. I'm always looking at, where's the threshold now? Was the threshold from the word level to the phrase level to the sentence level? Where's his threshold now? Where does he begin to stutter? So very carefully bring up time pressure and demands. There's a game that's not in print anymore. You can get it online used. It's called Outburst Junior. Outburst Junior is a game where you name items from a category as fast as you can. So, for example, I say fruits, and I begin the timer. Apple, strawberry, orange, grapefruit, kiwi. It is only one word at a time, but because of the tempo, it can sometimes activate the stuttering. So one theme I want to press here is your goal is not to suppress stuttering. Right goals, child will be 100% fluent in speech tasks in the speech room or the clinic, because what happens is then they're stuttering everywhere but your speech room. So you do want to bring time pressure and demands into therapy on purpose. Groups can do that, but make sure that you have a rapport, a really good rapport within the group, so that children will correct their stutters with their peers. So we are winding up. It's almost time for questions. I hope that helped you to get in your mind a list of activities to move up a ladder to teach children how to correct stutters. So I always end with a quote I love. The effectiveness of your life is determined by the effectiveness of your communication. Any kind of